This is the Everyday AI Show, the everyday podcast where we simplify AI and bring its power to your fingertips. Listen daily for practical advice to boost your career, business, and everyday life.
I've literally gotten dozens of messages from people talking about how much ChatGPT is helping them. And I was kind of surprised. A lot of people said, hey, I am neurodivergent, and something as simple as ChatGPT has completely changed the way that I work and has changed my relationship with coworkers. So it's something that I'm excited to explore a little bit more today on Everyday AI. So welcome if you're new here. Thanks for joining. My name's Jordan Wilson, and I am the host of Everyday AI. We're a daily live stream, podcast, and free daily newsletter helping everyday people like you and me not just learn generative AI, but how we can all actually leverage it to grow our companies and to grow our careers. So I'm extremely excited for today's episode. But as a reminder, if you are joining us, go to youreverydayai.com and sign up for the free daily newsletter. Well, here's why. Normally, I go over the AI news of the day live. This is actually a pre-recorded episode that will be debuting live. So we still have all of the AI news. Just make sure to check out the newsletter today for that. And while you're on our website, go ahead, look around. I tell people it is a free generative AI university. Depending on if you want to learn about Gen AI and sales, entrepreneurship, career, etc., it's all on there. So I'm extremely excited to just really explore the positive impacts of neurodiversity and AI. And don't worry, it's not just me talking about that. I actually have an expert on the topic today. So let's go ahead and bring on to the show. There we go. We have Dr. Maureen Dunne, who is an educator, entrepreneur, author of a lot of things. Maureen, thank you so much for joining the Everyday AI Show.
Hey, thank you. Great to be here, Jordan.
All right. So, hey, could you just tell everyone a little bit about the work that you do? Because I know you hold a lot of roles. You know, you speak all over the world, really, on this topic. So, yeah, could you just give everyone a little bit of a background about yourself?
Absolutely. So, I've been working in the field for over 20 years. A lot has changed since then. So it's been it's been really fascinating, and I've worked in a number of different roles. I've helped start some social impact funds, investing in neurodiversity. I did my Ph.D. in this space at Oxford University when I was studying as a Rhodes Scholar. I've most recently completed my first book called The Neurodiversity Edge.
So, I mean, tell us a little bit about, your experience. So you said you've been in the field for, more than 2 decades. Even for me personally, I feel like I've started to hear a lot more about neurodiversity in the past year or two. Am I imagining that, or has it just become, a bigger topic of conversation now recently?
No, it's yeah, for sure. I think we're finally at this point where it's becoming more of a mainstream conversation, which was really not happening before. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but I think there's been a lot more public awareness. There's a lot more people that are being diagnosed, even like late diagnoses, and it's I think the field has evolved a lot over time, and there's been just more awareness of just how large of a population the neurodivergent group is. I mean, we're looking at, at minimum 15 to 20% of the global population.
Wow. And could you just help us better understand, what does it even mean to be neurodivergent?
Sure, absolutely. So, the neurodiversity term was coined in the late 1990s by an Australian sociologist named Judy Singer. Obviously, autism, dyslexia, ADHD, dyspraxia, a lot of these typologies have existed, for a long time, for far longer than that. But starting in the late 1990s, there started to be more of this, these conversations around looking at neurodiversity and, people that autistic people, ADHDers, dyslexia, from a more strength-based perspective. But the really important idea and where things started when the term was coined was just to thinking about neurodiversity as being part of the natural spectrum of what it means to be human, rather than just this pure medical deficit model where there's, we're separating humanity into people that are normal and people that are deficient, that it's actually a lot more complex and nuanced than that. And that there's this rich diversity of ways of thinking and ways of perceiving the world that should be valued, and that fits within the normal spectrum of what it means to be human.
So maybe even before we jump into AI and how AI can have a positive impact, can you just, for those of us that, don't fully understand, could you just help us, walk us through maybe, the average, person working, right? Maybe even here in the US, what are some, common, challenges that people, with neurodiversities can face? I know it's different depending on, if it's ADHD versus autism, et cetera. But, in general, what are some of those common threads that neurodivergent people face in today's workplace?
Sure, absolutely. So start out with the sort of deeper problem that I see, and then I'll talk a little bit about some specifics of things that I think could be done. So one of the deeper issues I found in my experience is just, and this sort of goes for everyone, all of us, neurodivergent people and neurotypical alike, but we're just the way our brains are wired. We are prone to taking a lot of sort of like mental shortcuts, right? These like cognitive biases, and sometimes actually pretty often, if we're not, careful to try to be more aware of them, they do influence our judgments. And so, in my book, I talk a lot of the Neurodiversity. I talk a lot about some of the different types of cognitive biases that could get in the way of genuine inclusion. One of them is the confirmation bias. And I bring this up because it's well known, the neurodivergent community is, there's a huge disproportionality in terms of like the potential to contribute and the economic opportunities that are actually available. And the unemployment rate is still, unacceptably high. There's, 30 to 40% neurodivergent people across all the typologies that are unemployed or underemployed. If you look at the autistic population in particular, there's some stats out there, there's even as high as 85%, and that includes college graduates. Okay, so there's a lot of challenges, I think, in just our biases too about how to do interviews and how to evaluate talent. And, it's often the case that there's just a sort of standard script of how to do interviews, how we're, evaluating people that are applying for jobs, and often it's the case that some of those scripts really aren't related to what's required for that job, and that could naturally disadvantage, right, some neurodivergent people. So and then also I think it's important, like if someone discloses and says they're neurodivergent, whether it's ADHD, dyslexia, autism, it's really important to remind yourself that, like, everything's case by case. Like, I think it's, so that, again, going back to the cognitive biases, like we're wired in a way where there's these mental shortcuts. So I think people, like, they'll hear autism and then they immediately assume, like, okay, there's no way this person is going to be a good, good at certain types of jobs, or, but yet I've known actually some pretty amazing autistic leaders that have even been in marketing and like all sorts of jobs that you wouldn't think, at first glance would make sense, right? And so I think just the deeper issue is for all of us to just become aware of the cognitive biases, the unconscious cognitive biases that all come into play, like into our communication and assessment of candidates, and then to be actively, integrating into our talent assessment processes and systems, different strategies and ways so that there's so these biases are not preventing the kind of talent that you really want to be recruiting at your company. And that could be things such as, being more flexible overall, but like offering non-traditional interview processes where there's a lot of thoughtfulness going into the design of that process, and allowing, people to submit evidence of what they can do, so it's not so subjective, right? A lot of interview processes tend to be really about, a subjective impression of a person. In fact, I had an interview the other day, and they said, yeah, I know CEO said, yeah, he mostly hires, his main criteria is if he can hang with the person. Well, that's not probably the best criteria to hire someone if you actually want your business to excel, especially in the paradigm that we're looking at in the future, where things are going to be changing really fast.
Yeah. And speaking of changing really fast, this is kind of what I started the show with. Is I've, personally gotten dozens of messages from neurodivergent people saying that AI has changed the way they work. It's, people are saying it's helping them communicate faster, helping them, be more productive, helping them, learn, in a more personalized way. Maureen, what's been your response so far? I know you're very tapped into the neurodivergent community. What's been your response so far? What would you say people, with different, neurodivergencies are saying about generative AI and the impact it's had?
Yeah, sure. So, and the, I've been in general sort of more focused on some of the limitations of AI and understanding types of cognition and modes of thought that actually complement AI really, really well, like nonlinear thinking, lateral thinking. And we could talk about that later. But I have also heard from a lot of neurodivergent people I know about the kinds, the ways in which it has been improving their productivity and helping. And one example is, and I haven't tested this out myself, but I know someone who told me that, it's that in the past, he's kind of had anxiety about like just responding to communication with emails, and making sure they're really polite, and so this generative AI, I guess, has helped him like come up with different types of he'll know his bullet points, right, in terms of like what he wants to communicate, but it helps speed up the process and reduce anxiety to have these sort of templates, right, to make sure that he's getting back to people really quickly, that that communication is seamless and faster than what it would normally be. And then I've also I know people that have been using it just for research purposes, and I've heard from a number of neurodivergent people that have some challenges, like in terms of like organization, especially like organizing information. Even I have a few friends that have said, that sometimes struggle to like just get all the documents they need in time for like filing their taxes, for instance, and are kind of excited about, the potential of generative AI, where like the stuffs that they struggle with will actually be really easy, because then they could just, ask the system to kind of pull up different documents from their emails, and gather all that information at some point soon. And then, that those type of tasks, which maybe are difficult for people that have some like what we call executive functioning challenges, are, it frees up a lot of time then for creativity, for innovation, for the types of things that a lot of neurodivergent people I know, especially entrepreneurs, are exceptional at.
Yeah, and I do want to focus on that side as well. But first, you mentioned a couple of things there that I think are important. You mentioned things as simple as not spending as much time, replying to an email, decreasing anxiety around like, is this maybe going to come off a certain way? Do you think that there's kind of this maybe outlook or this idea that right now generative AI and even something as simple as using ChatGPT can almost serve as an assistant or a sounding board for someone with neurodiversity to either help them learn something faster or in a different way, communicate in a different way with their peers? Do you think that's kind of one of the biggest positive impacts that generative AI can have, at least topically?
Yeah, possibly. I think there's that potential. There is something called the double empathy problem, which we won't have time to get into today. And I talk about this in my book. But for I think that there's a lot we can do to share, close the gaps on some shared experiences and communication and empathy gaps between different neurotypes. And I think ChatGPT could potentially be a really great resource for that. And then I think not just in beyond neurodivergent people, like again, just freeing up some productivity, right? Freeing up time where we could all be focused on solving some deeper problems, right? We have so many problems in the world, and I think there's a lot of potential for neurodivergent people and neurotypical people to complement each other in terms of their strengths and challenges and work alongside machines and generative AI in a way where we really could be making a positive difference.
Yeah, and I think that's, even looking at the future of work is probably important, because the general school of thought is, generative AI systems are going to be taking over, some sort of that knowledge work or cognitive work that we talk about. So, what should neurodivergent people be following when it comes to future implementations of AI in the workplace, if we're hearing that, hey, it's going to take a lot of, potentially take a lot or help automate a lot of this cognitive work? Right. So what does that mean for, neurodivergent people?
Are you still running in circles trying to figure out how to actually grow your business with AI? Maybe your company has been tinkering with large language models for a year or more, but can't really get traction to find ROI on Gen AI. Hey, this is Jordan Wilson, host of this very podcast. Companies like Adobe, Microsoft, and NVIDIA have partnered with us because they trust our expertise in educating the masses around generative AI to get ahead. And some of the most innovative companies in the country hire us to help with their AI strategy and to train hundreds of their employees on how to use Gen AI. So whether you're looking for ChatGPT training for thousands or just need help building your front-end AI strategy, you can partner with us too, just like some of the biggest companies in the world do. Go to youreverydayai.com/partner to get in contact with our team, or you can just click on the partner section of our website. We'll help you stop running in those AI circles and help get your team ahead and build a straight path to ROI on Gen AI.
Yeah, well, obviously, it means a lot for everyone, right? Not just neurodivergent people. It's going to change how all of humanity is working. This is the first time in history where this level of cognitive work, as you mentioned, is going to be taken over by machines, and so that will just be this huge adjustment. And I think we're all going to have to adapt to this new world, and it's going to increasingly accelerate. Having said that, I think that a lot of the skill sets that and it's important not to generalize, right? Because the neurodiversity community and neurodivergence in general is an extremely broad spectrum of different strengths and weaknesses that we all have. But I think that there are I think that it's an exciting time also because there's certain types of skill sets, I think, that historically have been undervalued, at least in the economy. Like we've had a lot of innovators that happen to still make their mark, in the world. But, if you look at just in terms of just more numbers, like the unemployment rates, right now we're well under 4% in terms of average unemployment in the United States. And if you look at the neurodivergent community, if it's across all typologies, 30 to 40%. Yet there are a lot of unique talents and skill sets. And again, I'm not going to generalize across everyone, but there's types of skill sets that maybe have been undervalued in the past that I think are going to increasingly be important as in the future, right? And so people that can connect dots between different fields and naturally think in a way where there's these intuitive leaps of creative insight, and there's not a real obvious way in which they're solving problems that are going beyond sort of traditional linear thinking, but there's nonlinear approaches to problem solving, a lot of lateral thinking, a lot of reverse engineering, associative thinking. A lot of these skill sets, I think are increasingly going to become more important, and there is documented overlap with neurodivergence.
So just so I make sure I'm understanding this correctly. So you're kind of saying that there's maybe these undervalued or, unique skill sets that neurodivergent people have and can bring to the table, that maybe AI can help leverage these skill sets, where before maybe some of these, unique skill sets were being underutilized. Is that kind of what you're saying, and what AI could maybe help with?
Yeah. And I think it's obviously, every human being is valuable, and I think there's important to find a place for everyone in our economy. But just from a cognitive scientist perspective, I think a lot of even interdisciplinary thinking or systems thinking, we had become in the past such a specialist, there's been such a focus on specialization, and that sometimes, we've undervalued the people that are really thinking outside of those boundaries, right? And I think that for some neurodivergent people that naturally fall into that type of thinking style, it's going to be much harder to automate those modes of thinking, right? And maybe far in the future that'll be easier, but I do think we're entering this period of time where I think we're all going to be really surprised, and have already been surprised at what even ChatGPT can do, right? In terms of, but there's still sort of mashups of existing human expressions, and so what I think is going to increasingly be more valuable is these types of skill sets that fall outside of those maps or those boundaries.
And, I'd love for, whether our audience tuning in live or those of you on the podcast, I'd love to hear from you. What are ways that you think AI is already or could maybe in the future, better leverage, your unique skill sets? Would love to feature some of those in the newsletter today. Maureen, but so your new book, The Neurodiversity Edge, I'd love to hear, I know it tackles, neurodiversity from all different angles, but, specifically, what did you find, or what were some of your takeaways just as it comes to neurodiversity and AI, or, neurodiversity and future technologies? What can you tell us a little bit about some of your findings there?
Yeah. So there's a chapter where I go into, strengths that neurodivergent people bring to the table, but also the final chapter is called Neurodiversity in the Age of Transformation. And I think that chapter in particular will be interesting to leaders who are looking to future-proof their organization. And, it talks in more detail. I've got to talk about a story of a mentor I had when I was at Oxford Dunne, who was dyslexic, that, really, put me through some interesting thought experiments for my benefit. And, looking at just how accelerated change happens, in terms of we're entering this period now where things are going to move a lot faster and accelerate a lot faster in terms of computational power than we've maybe ever seen right, in history. And how, cognitive diversity is important, right? It's hugely important. We're entering this very uncertain period, and there is going to be a lot of change. And AI systems, what they do really, really well is they're going to be able to crunch data and take over a lot of linear thinking tasks much faster and much better than most humans. But then we need to focus on, whether we're neurodivergent or neurotypical, we need to focus on what we're really good at as human beings. And I think that it does, my research suggests that there is this special place that perhaps has been underappreciated for human neurodivergence in particular, especially with regards to some of the cognitive approaches and atypical problem-solving approaches, and also just coming and perceiving at problems from a very different lens than neurotypical people are, which in itself is incredibly valuable. Just even as a hedge against groupthink, as you want people, whether it's in the boardroom or in your C-suite or throughout your organization, you want people who are going to be able to detect some blind spots that others may not.
I think that's such an important aspect right there, detecting blind spots that others can't. It's hugely important. So I mean, Maureen, we've covered a lot in today's episode, from, going into what neurodivergence means, and, some of the special or untapped, skill sets that AI can actually, help better leverage or better bring to light. But, as we wrap up, what is the one takeaway that you hope people can kind of gather from today's conversation, specifically on the positive impact of AI and neurodiversity?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that there's this concept called complementary cognition, and I think that organizations of all kinds will be most competitive if they are not just preparing for how their organizations might change in terms of like, how do we integrate AI? How do we integrate, these emerging technologies, but thinking about it from a human resources perspective. And, there's a concept I call neurodiversification over cultural fit. And, sort of taking that seriously and understanding in the context of the age of AI and the paradigm we're entering now, how it's more important than ever that we really, take the time as leaders to understand neurodiversity, understand cognitive diversity, understand, how to, leverage our human resources in a way where we're complementing each other as humans, and also working alongside AI to be the most productive and innovative that we can.
Thank you so much. I think this conversation is one of those that is going to be extremely helpful for all of us, right? Just creating more inclusive and better understanding workplaces, especially as our workplaces are changing so much, with AI. So Dr. Maureen Dunne, thank you so much for joining the Everyday AI Show. We really appreciate your time and your insights.
Okay, thank you, Jordan. I appreciate it. I enjoyed it.
And hey, as a reminder, everyone, there's going to be a lot more. As always, we're going to be breaking down today's conversation in the newsletter. We'll make sure to drop more information about Maureen's new book, as well as additional resources and insights that maybe we didn't even get time to cover today. So make sure, if you haven't already, please go to youreverydayai.com, sign up for that free daily newsletter, and we'll see you back tomorrow and every day for more Everyday AI. Thanks, y'all.
And that's a wrap for today's edition of Everyday AI. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave us a rating. It helps keep us going. For a little more AI magic, visit youreverydayai.com and sign up to our daily newsletter so you don't get left behind. Go break some barriers, and we'll see you next time.